The rise of Christianity and the Roman Empire's religious struggles. History is shaped by struggles. Some fought with swords, others with words, and still others with faith. The 3rd century AD saw one of the most significant ideological battles in history, as Christianity clashed with the deeply entrenched religious traditions of the Roman Empire. This was not merely a dispute over theology. It was a fundamental conflict between two worldviews, one rooted in tradition and civic duty, the other in a radical new belief system that refused to bow to the gods of Rome. For centuries, Rome had been a religiously inclusive empire. Conquered peoples were often allowed to continue worshipping their own deities, provided they also acknowledged the supremacy of Rome's pantheon and the divine authority of the emperor. Religion was not just a personal matter, it was a political one. Public sacrifices and state rituals were seen as essential to maintaining the favor of the gods, ensuring Rome's prosperity and military success. But Christianity challenged this system. It was not just another mystery cult or imported foreign faith. It was a belief that demanded exclusivity. To Christians, there was only one true God, and all others were false. This rejection of Rome's religious order was seen as a direct challenge to the very foundations of the empire. The refusal of Christians to participate in public sacrifices was not viewed as an innocent act of piety. It was seen as rebellion, as an act of defiance against the state itself. This defiance had consequences. Persecution became a tool of control, and those who refused to conform faced imprisonment, torture, and death. But rather than breaking the Christian movement, persecution only made it stronger. The stories of martyrs, men and women who willingly suffered and died for their faith, spread like wildfire, inspiring others and creating a powerful sense of unity among believers. It was in this charged atmosphere of faith and fear that the legend of the Theban Legion emerged, a story of an entire Roman military unit that chose martyrdom over obedience. A story of faith tested in the fires of persecution. But was it history, or was it legend? Since its founding, Rome had been a society deeply intertwined with religious observance. The city's leaders, from its earliest kings to the emperors of the later empire, had always positioned themselves as intermediaries between the gods and the people. Religion was not merely a private affair. It was woven into the very fabric of Roman life. Temples, sacrifices, and public ceremonies were seen as essential to maintaining the pax deorum, the peace of the gods. Romans believed that the stability and success of the empire depended on their continued favor, and it was the duty of every citizen to participate in religious rites. To refuse was not just an act of personal belief. It was a potential threat to the entire state. Most religions absorbed into the Roman world had adapted to this expectation. Even the many mystery cults that flourished in Rome, including the worship of Isis, Mithras, and Cybele, found ways to integrate their beliefs into the wider religious framework of the empire. But Christianity was different. Christians refused to make sacrifices to the gods. They refused to burn incense before the statues of the emperor. They refused to acknowledge the divine authority of Rome's rulers. To the state, this was not merely an act of devotion, it was sedition. Persecution followed, but it was not always consistent. Some emperors largely ignored Christianity, while others sought to root it out entirely. The first major persecution came under Nero, in 64 AD, following the Great Fire of Rome. Looking for a scapegoat, Nero blamed the Christians, leading to mass executions. Over the following centuries, persecution would rise and fall, depending on the political climate and the whims of individual emperors. Under Emperor Decius 249 to 51 AD, an empire-wide edict demanded that all citizens offer sacrifices to the Roman gods. Those who refused faced imprisonment or death. But it was under Diocletian and Maximian, in the late 3rd century, that persecution reached its peak. Seeking to restore Rome's traditional values, these emperors launched what became known as the Great Persecution. Christian churches were destroyed, scriptures were burnt, and thousands of believers were executed. But rather than stamping out the faith, persecution had the opposite effect. It solidified Christian identity, creating a culture in which suffering for one's beliefs was seen as the highest form of devotion. The idea of martyrdom took hold, and stories of those who had died for their faith spread far beyond the Christian communities themselves. It was in this era of conflict and conviction that the story of the Theban Legion took shape. By 286 AD, the The Roman Empire faced not just religious turmoil, but military and political instability as well. One of the most significant threats came from a group known as the Bagaudae, a loose coalition of peasants, deserters, and rebels in Gaul who had risen up against Roman rule. They were tired of heavy taxation, corrupt officials, and the constant demands of military service. In response, Emperor Maximian, co-ruler with Diocletian, led a campaign to crush the revolt. According to the legend, among the forces sent to aid Maximian was the Theban legion, a full unit of 6,000 soldiers, all said to be devout Christians from Egypt. When ordered to make sacrifices to the Roman gods as part of the campaign, they refused. Even more damning, they allegedly refused to take up arms against fellow Christians in Gaul. Furious at their defiance, Maximian resorted to an ancient Roman punishment, decimation. Every 10th soldier was executed, a brutal method designed to force the rest into submission. But the Thebans stood firm. A second decimation followed. Still, they refused. Finally, Maximian gave the ultimate order, the complete annihilation of the legion. According to the legend, not a single man renounced his faith. Every last soldier was put to the sword, dying as martyrs. But is this story true? The tale of the Theban legion is compelling, but historical scrutiny raises many doubts. First, there is little evidence that a full Egyptian legion was ever deployed to Gaul. While it is plausible that individual soldiers or smaller units may have been transferred, the logistics of moving an entire legion across the empire are questionable. Second, the numbers given, -6,000 men, are suspicious. A standard Roman legion typically consisted of around 5,500 soldiers, making the Christian sources' accounts unreliable. Third, the concept of double decimation is highly implausible. Decimation was an extreme punishment, rarely used because it weakened the fighting force. The idea that a commander would decimate a legion twice and then execute the remaining men defies both military logic and the need for manpower in Rome's campaigns. Finally, the primary source for the story, a letter attributed to St. Eucherius, was written centuries later and is filled with inconsistencies. There are no contemporary Roman records of the event, making it difficult to verify. The martyrdom of the Theban legion, a tale of faith and defiance. The cold wind of Gaul carried whispers of rebellion. Across the vast Roman territories, tensions flared as the empire struggled to maintain its grip on its restless provinces. The Bagaudae uprising, a desperate revolt against Rome's oppressive rule, had thrown the region into chaos. To crush the rebellion, Emperor Maximian called upon his legions, summoning reinforcements from across the empire. Among them, according to legend, was the Theban legion. These men were said to have come from Thebes, deep in the heart of Egypt. Unlike the typical Roman soldier, they were not merely warriors of the empire. They were soldiers of faith, devout Christians who, despite serving Rome, held their loyalty to a higher power. As they arrived in Gaul, their orders were clear: put down the rebellion, enforce Roman rule, and most importantly, offer sacrifices to the gods in a ritual of loyalty. For any other legion, this would have been a routine command, an oath of allegiance to the divine authority of Rome. But for the Theban legion, it was a test of faith unlike any they had ever faced. They refused. The news sent shockwaves through the Roman ranks. To defy an imperial decree was not just disobedience, it was treason. Rome did not tolerate defiance, least of all from its own soldiers. Emperor Maximian, upon hearing of their defiance, reacted with the full force of Roman military discipline. He ordered an act of terror so severe that it was rarely used: decimation. Decimation was one of the most feared punishments in the Roman military, reserved for the gravest acts of insubordination. In this brutal form of discipline, every 10th man was selected by lot and executed. The remaining soldiers were forced to watch as their comrades were slaughtered, a grim reminder of the price of disobedience. For the Theban legion, this was a moment of reckoning. As their fellow soldiers were cut down, they had a choice: bow to the emperor's will and offer sacrifices, or stand firm in their faith, knowing that doing so would mean certain death. Their leader, Saint Maurice, addressed his men. His words, lost to time, have been reconstructed in legend. He is said to have told them that their duty was not to an emperor, but to God, and that death in his name was not a defeat, but a victory. With unwavering resolve, they refused once more. Maximian, incensed by their defiance, ordered a second decimation. Again, every 10th man was slaughtered, and still, the remaining soldiers did not break. By now, The situation had escalated beyond military discipline. It had become a statement. A legion of Rome was defying the empire not with swords, but with faith. Furious beyond reason, Maximian issued the final command, the complete extermination of the Theban legion. The execution of an entire legion was unprecedented. Rome relied on its legions to maintain its empire. Every soldier was a valuable asset. But to Maximian, these men were no longer soldiers, they were traitors. One by one, they were cut down. The rivers of Agonum, where this massacre allegedly took place, were said to run red with the blood of the slain. Yet, not a single man renounced his faith. They faced their deaths with the quiet conviction of those who believed they were not truly dying, but ascending to something greater. With this act, the Theban legion had secured their place in Christian history, not as warriors of Rome, but as martyrs of the faith. To the Romans, a massacre was meant to be an example, a warning to all who would dare challenge the authority of the state. But to Christians, it became something else entirely, a beacon of defiance, a testament to the strength of faith. Martyrdom was not a concept invented by Christianity, but within this new religion, it took on an entirely new meaning. The stories of those who suffered for their beliefs were not seen as tragedies, but as victories. The early church spread these tales far and wide, transforming the executed into saints and heroes. The greater the persecution, the stronger the faith became. The Theban legion's story fit perfectly into this narrative. Whether it was entirely true or not, it symbolized the struggles of Christians in an empire that sought to suppress them. The tale of 6,000 soldiers choosing death over apostasy became a source of inspiration, reinforcing the idea that faith was worth any sacrifice. But was it history, or was it legend? Despite its powerful message, modern historians have cast serious doubt on the authenticity of the Theban legion story. Several critical issues challenge its credibility. The size of the legion. The number 6,000 is suspicious. A standard Roman legion was typically around 5,500 soldiers, making this claim questionable. Was an entire unit from Egypt truly transferred to Gaul? There is no contemporary Roman record of such a movement. Logistical improbabilities. The idea that an entire legion was brought from Egypt to Gaul raises questions. While Rome did move troops across vast distances, it would have been far more practical to reinforce Maximian with legions already stationed in Europe. The absence of supporting historical records makes this claim unlikely. Double decimation. Decimation was a severe punishment, but it was used sparingly because it weakened the fighting strength of an army. The notion that Maximian would decimate the legion twice and then execute the rest strains credibility. Rome needed its soldiers. Wiping out an entire force was not only brutal, but strategically reckless. The primary source, St. Eucherius. The earliest known account of the Theban legion comes from a letter attributed to St. Eucherius, written centuries after the supposed events. This document contains inconsistencies and is widely considered unreliable by modern scholars. So, if the story is more legend than history, why has it endured? The power of the Theban legion story lies not in its factual accuracy, but in what it represents. It encapsulates the struggles of early Christians, their defiance against oppression, and their willingness to die for their beliefs. Over time, the legend took on a life of its own. Saint Maurice, the legion's leader, became a revered figure in Christian tradition. He was adopted as a patron saint by several European royal houses, including the Holy Roman Emperors and the Swiss Guard. By the 12th century, artistic depictions of Saint Maurice began to portray him as a black African, reflecting the growing recognition of North Africa's role in early Christianity. This image predated modern racial constructs, serving as a testament to the diversity of the Roman world. North Africa's influence on the Roman Empire. When people think of the Roman Empire, they often picture the grand temples of the Forum, the legions marching under the eagle standard, or the opulence of imperial palaces. But there is another Rome, one that stretched beyond Italy, beyond Europe, into the sands and cities of North Africa. The connection between Rome and North Africa is not a minor footnote in history. It was a defining relationship that helped shape the empire's economy, military, culture, and even its belief systems. From the shores of Carthage to the streets of Alexandria, the influence of Africa ran deep in the veins of Rome. Many have heard the legend of the Theban legion, a tale of faith and defiance that links Egypt to Rome's military history. But the true story of North Africa's role in the empire goes far beyond myths of martyrdom. It is a story of conquest and resistance, of trade and war. of cultural exchange and intellectual brilliance. How did this often overlooked part of the empire leave its mark on Roman civilization? To understand, we must go back to the wars that first brought Rome to Africa, back to the rise of one of Rome's greatest enemies, and back to the city that became the beating heart of knowledge in the ancient world. No discussion of Rome's connection to Africa can begin without Hannibal. If Rome was forged through war, then Hannibal Barca was the fire that tested its strength. The Second Punic War 218. 201 BC saw Rome face its greatest challenge, as Hannibal, the Carthaginian general from North Africa, led his army, including war elephants, across the Alps to strike at the heart of the Republic. His campaign is legendary, not just for its audacity, but for how close he came to changing history. The Battle of Cannae, where Hannibal encircled and annihilated a vastly superior Roman force, remains one of the most studied military engagements of all time. But beyond strategy and tactics, Hannibal's war revealed something else: the deep military traditions of North Africa. Carthaginian forces included Numidian cavalry, whose unmatched speed and maneuverability would later become a crucial asset to Rome itself. The war also reinforced the strategic importance of Africa. Rome realized that controlling Carthage meant controlling the Mediterranean, and so, Carthage fell. By 146 BC, Rome had destroyed its greatest rival, turning North Africa into a Roman province. But conquest did not mean erasure. Instead, it led to one of the greatest cultural and economic partnerships in antiquity. Although Carthage had been defeated, its military traditions lived on within the empire that conquered it. Roman legions soon came to rely on North African soldiers, especially cavalry, from the very lands they had once fought against. The Numidians, renowned for their light cavalry, became some of the most valuable auxiliary forces in the Roman army. Their ability to strike quickly, evade counterattacks, and harass enemy lines made them indispensable in campaigns from Britain to the Middle East. When Rome fought against the Parthians, it was often Numidian riders who ensured that Roman forces were not outflanked by the swift-moving Eastern cavalry. Beyond the Numidians, North Africa also provided elite heavy cavalry and infantry. By the time of the late Empire, entire legions were recruited from African provinces, with North African-born generals even rising to the rank of emperor. One of the most significant of these was Septimius Severus, who ruled from 193 to 211 AD. Born in Leptis Magna, modern Libya, Severus reshaped Rome in profound ways. He expanded the empire's borders, strengthened its military, and left behind monumental architecture that blended Roman and North African styles. His rise to power shattered the notion that Rome was ruled only by men from Italy. His reign marked the increasing influence of the provinces' imperial affairs. If Carthage represented North Africa's military legacy, then Alexandria stood as its intellectual crown jewel. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC, this Egyptian city quickly became the most important center of learning in the ancient world. Alexandria's famous library and museum were unparalleled institutions, drawing scholars, scientists, and philosophers from across the Mediterranean. It was here that Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth, that Ptolemy developed his geocentric model of the universe, and that Euclid laid the foundations of geometry. But beyond science, Alexandria was also a battleground of ideas, especially religious ones. As Christianity began to spread, Alexandria became a key center for theological debate. The city produced some of the most influential early Christian thinkers, including Origen and Athanasius, whose works would shape Christian doctrine for centuries. The city was also a melting pot of Greek, Egyptian, and Roman traditions. Temples to Egyptian gods stood alongside Greek-style theaters, while Roman emperors built monuments that reflected their claim over both Africa and the Hellenistic world. Alexandria was proof that Rome was not just an empire of conquest, it was an empire of adaptation. It absorbed and repurposed the cultures it encountered, creating something new in the process. North Africa's influence was not just felt in war and scholarship, it was etched into the very stones of Rome itself. Egyptian obelisks, looted from their homeland, were erected in the heart of Rome as symbols of imperial power. The cult of Isis, an Egyptian goddess, spread throughout the empire, merging with Roman religious practices. But perhaps the most striking example of Africa's role in Roman society was in the Colosseum. Exotic animals, lions, crocodiles, elephants, were captured in North Africa and transported to Rome for brutal spectacles. The grand gladiatorial games often featured wild beasts in elaborate hunts or as instruments of execution. These events were more than just entertainment. They were displays of Rome's dominance over nature and its empire. The men who fought in these games, the bestiarii, were sometimes trained hunters, but often they were prisoners, many of them Christians sentenced to die in the arena. It was here, in front of tens of thousands of spectators, that faith was tested in blood and sand. Spectacle, martyrdom, and the Theban legion's lasting legacy. The Roman Empire was built on conquest, discipline, and the firm belief that power had to be demonstrated, not just through war, but through spectacle. Nowhere was this more evident than in the Colosseum, where thousands would gather to witness displays of strength, brutality, and control. Here, the power of Rome was made tangible, not just in the clash of gladiators, but in the execution of criminals, rebels, and, most infamously, Christians. By the late 3rd century, the empire was at a crossroads. Christianity was no longer a fringe movement, it was spreading rapidly, even among Rome's own military ranks. The executions of Christians, once meant to deter others, had instead turned them into martyrs, inspiring even greater numbers to join the faith. This conflict between Rome's desire for dominance and Christianity's defiance played out in the most public arena possible, the gladiatorial games. And it was here that faith and fear collided, where the might of the empire sought to crush the spirit of a people who refused to break. The Colosseum was more than a battleground. It was a stage for imperial propaganda. It was where Rome put its power on display, not just through human combat, but through the spectacle of nature itself. Exotic animals, shipped from the farthest reaches of the empire, including North Africa, were brought into the arena, both as symbols of Rome's dominance over the natural world and as instruments of execution. Lions, leopards, crocodiles, and even elephants were used in elaborate hunts known as venations, where trained hunters fought against wild beasts. But these animals served a darker purpose as well. They were used to execute criminals and prisoners of war. And among those condemned were many Christians. The image of Christians being thrown to lions has become one of the most enduring symbols of early Christian persecution. But was it reality or exaggeration? Historical records suggest that while some Christians were indeed executed in the arena, it was not as widespread as later traditions would claim. Tacitus, the Roman historian, describes how Emperor Nero used Christians as scapegoats after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, having them torn apart by dogs or set ablaze as human torches. However, by the 3rd and 4th centuries, the number of public executions of Christians had declined, replaced by more systematic forms of persecution. So why does this imagery persist? Because, like the story of the Theban legion, it became a powerful tool for the Christian narrative, a symbol of faith in the face of cruelty, of unwavering belief in the face of death. Public executions in the Colosseum were not just about punishment, they were about control. The Roman Empire thrived on order, and the game served as a stark reminder of what happened to those who defy imperial rule. For the average Roman citizen, the spectacle was a mix of entertainment and reinforcement of Rome's supremacy. The games blurred the line between justice and performance, turning executions into grand spectacles that reaffirmed the empire's power. But they also served a deeper psychological purpose: deterrence. Watching prisoners face their deaths, often with dignity and defiance, left a lasting impression. This is where the execution of Christians differed from other public punishments. Instead of cowering in fear, many Christian martyrs faced death with calm resolve, singing hymns, praying, and refusing to recant their faith. What was meant to be a demonstration of Rome's dominance instead became a spectacle of resistance, inadvertently strengthening the Christian movement. As stories of these martyrs spread, they took on legendary status, none more so than the tale of the Theban legion. The story of the Theban legion is a classic example of how legend intertwines with history. Whether or not the full legion was executed, as the tale suggests, the story itself became larger than life. In medieval Europe, the Theban legion took on new meaning. Saint Maurice, the supposed leader of the legion, became a revered figure, his name invoked by kings and military orders. The Holy Roman emperors adopted Saint Maurice as a patron saint, and his image was emblazoned on banners and coats of arms. But something remarkable happened during the 12th century. Saint Maurice began to be depicted as a black African. This was not an anomaly or an attempt to rewrite history. It was a recognition of Rome's diverse past and North Africa's deep influence on the empire. Long before modern racial constructs, medieval Europe acknowledged that the Roman world was vast and multicultural. The depiction of Saint Maurice as a dark-skinned African soldier served as a testament to this diversity. Long before such representations became politically charged, legends like that of the Theban Legion endure because they tap into something universal: the struggle between authority and faith, between power and conviction. Whether or not the story happened exactly as told, its impact is undeniable. History is often written not just by what happened, but by what people believe happened. The Theban Legion story provided inspiration for centuries, reinforcing the idea that faith could stand against the might of an empire. But more importantly, it serves as a reminder to approach history with a critical eye. Myths and legends are not just fabrications. They are reflections of the societies that created them. By studying them, we gain insight into the values, fears, and aspirations of those who came before us. The early Christian martyrs, whether in the Colosseum or in the fields of Aghanum, left behind a legacy that shaped Western religious and cultural identity. Their stories, some historical, some embellished, helped define what it meant to suffer for one's beliefs. The Roman Empire sought to destroy Christianity through persecution, but in doing so, it unintentionally strengthened it. The martyrs became heroes, their deaths transformed into symbols of ultimate devotion. The empire that had tried to erase Christianity ended up becoming its greatest stage, turning those it sought to crush into legends that would outlive Rome itself. And the Colosseum, the great arena where so many spectacles played out, where emperors once demonstrated their power. Today, it stands as a monument not to Rome's strength, but to its contradictions. The empire that ruled through fear ultimately fell, while the faith it sought to eliminate endured. In the end, history teaches us a simple lesson: power fades, but belief, whether in a god, an idea, or a legend, can be eternal. The tale of the Theban Legion is but one chapter in the vast history of Rome, Christianity, and the cultures that shaped the ancient world. But as we have seen, history is never just about facts. It is about the narratives we create, the myths we tell, and the ways in which the past continues to shape our present. What other stories lie buried beneath the ruins of Rome, waiting to be re-examined? That is for history, and for us, to decide.